Hey, welcome back to Black Lab Garage. So, I'm a Ford 460 person. So, what makes the 460 the greatest engine Ford ever built? And what was some of its drawbacks and how do you overcome them? Well, I'm going to show you. You ready? Come on, let's get into it. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is I do like the FE engines. They're good engines, they really are. But they were good for their time. I mean, the FE design goes back to the 50s. Okay? Ford learned a lot in the 50s and 60s. Okay? 429, 460, or the 385 series, which is named so after the 3.85 inch stroke. You got to remember that was one of the last pushrod engines Ford designed. The only one that came after that was the 400 Ford. You know, 429, 460 was first available in 1968. Canted valves. Canted valves breathe better than your standard old inline valves. I mean, even GM figured that out with the big block Chevrolet. And then, on the FE forums, everybody's, one of the first things people want to do is, well, I want to buy me a stroker kit, build me a 445 out of my 390. Okay, that's $2,000. Still got more cubic inches here. Well, I spend $2,000 for an engine that still doesn't have the cubic inches of this. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? And these will handle more abuse. I mean, the bone stock crankshafts in these things are very well known to handle 700 horsepower without any problems. You might be pushing it at 700, but I mean, it's been done many, many times with 2-bolt mains. Okay, the FEs, they had to be cross-bolted even at, 400 and 500 horsepower. So, the bottom end is stronger. The truck 460s use the same connecting rod as the 429 Super Cobra Jet. Same connecting rod. Let me show you the bottom end on this thing. I mean, granted, it don't have the deep Y block design like a FE does. The center line of the crank is here, but I mean, just look at the freaking bottom end on these things. Now, the truck rod, if you'll look, even though it's upside down, it's got what they call the old football rod bolts. And the difference is, let me show you a regular straight cut bolt. That is a straight cut bolt, which this is not the factory bolt. These have been replaced in these rods here, but this is 460 rod. And see how it's cut straight across? Okay, on these, it's not cut straight across. It's cut across, or cut out just enough to get the football head in there, and that's it. So that makes these stronger. But either rod is perfectly fine as long as you stay under 6,000. These will handle a little bit more, but either rod's fine under 6,000 with good bolts. I'll put it this way, I've never seen a 460 rod break down there of either kind. Of course, one drawback to the 429 460 is they are heavy. I mean, heavy. As far as I know, fully dressed, they're going to weigh around 750 pounds. Well, I mean, just fully dressed with the intake and stuff. I don't mean the front end accessories. So with all that, you're probably looking at 800 pounds anyway. So yeah, they outweigh an FE. But, like any of them, if you're going to put an aluminum intake on it, well, that'll save you some weight. Because while these intakes for these aren't as heavy as an FE intake, they're not real far from them either. They are a heavy intake. If you're putting aluminum heads on it, then it don't matter. You'll save a lot of weight putting aluminum heads on it. So now that we have the weight issue out of the way, what was the performance problems that they had? Well, let me show you the first and foremost one. Okay, when the 460 debuted in 1968, it had 11-to-1 compression. Because when they first came out, they had small combustion chamber heads and pretty much flat top pistons, or close to flat tops. Now, Ford cut the compression basically on all engines in 1971, 72 time frame, somewhere in there. And this ultimately was the piston that ended up in the 460. Look at this. I ate cereal out of a bowl that size when I was a kid. That killed the compression on them. That, and Ford also went to a bigger combustion chamber in 1972. 1972 was a 1 year only head for the 429 460, and they are garbage. You know, I'm talking about the standard head. And I'm not talking about police interceptor heads, but if you have a set of 72 model 429 460 heads that have an open chamber, toss them. Do yourself a favor, toss them as far as you can, because they will spark knock. It doesn't matter what, it's just a bad design. Ford realized that, and that's why they came out with the D3 head in 1973, which had a bigger combustion chamber, but it was still of a closed chamber bathtub design. They went to 93cc head in around 93 cc's. So 93cc head and Grand Canyon size dish pistons. Ford advertised the compression at 8-to-1. In reality, it's probably closer to 7.5-to-1. Okay. They're out there because you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh man, 460s get horrible gas mileage," and you know what? They're not wrong. They did. That's why there's no compression. You know, the more compression you have, the more efficient an engine becomes. Okay, right there is why they were horribly bad on gas. So how do we fix it? It's actually pretty easy. And there's a couple different solutions for it. See this flat top? They are easily available, fairly cheap. UEM, or United Engine, makes these pistons. These are hyperneutectic flat tops. These are known, basically these were the Ford 460 marine engine piston. So you can use these. While I always recommend balancing an engine, these will come out to the same factory balance if you're trying to get by without balancing. So, but these were the 460 Ford marine piston. And these with the 93cc chamber head, now I have had this block zero decked, you'll come out right at 9.5-to-1 compression with a 40 thousandths thick head gasket, which is perfect for the street. Now, let me show you option number 2. Option number 2, this is just a core engine, but this is a 87 to 92 fuel injected 460. As you can see, they have just a very small dish. You can put a set of these in a 460 and you'll come out about 8.8 to 9-to-1 compression, somewhere right in there. And I have used these pistons and they work great. I mean, it really wakes them up. So here's another cost-effective solution for you. Option number 3 is to use the piston out of a 1993 to, I think 460s ended in 97 or 98, but anyway, you could use those pistons. Now those pistons had a slightly bigger dish than the 88 to 92 piston, but they had a taller compression height, so it works out to about the same. So you can either buy the marine piston, which is a true flat top, or you can buy the 88 to 92, which just has a small dish, or you can buy the 93 to 97, piston, which has a taller compression height but a slightly bigger dish. But like I said, it gets close to the same. They did revise the fuel injected head in '93, and it had a slightly smaller combustion chamber. That is why they went to the slightly bigger dish. But like I said, it has taller compression height, so it still works out to about the same. Any three of those pistons will work fine to raise the compression up. Now, like everybody else in the 1970s, Ford was trying to meet emission standards. So what they did on the 429 and 460, besides dropping the compression on them, they retarded the timing on the camshaft 8 degrees. Now, if you don't believe me, take a look here. I've used white paint and made the dots lighter, so I've got them dot to dot like you're on the engine now. Look at the keyway. Here's the dot, there's the keyway. Whereas if you look at an older model set, and look at the keyway. Keyway's perfect, lower keyway's perfectly in line with the dot. Dot to dot, keyway's in line. Dot to dot, keyway's not in line. This is a retarded timing set. Retarding the camshaft 8 degrees will cost you about 20 horsepower. You can gain 20 horsepower roughly just by changing your timing set. So, lower compression, retarded timing. There's two things that killed the 460 and 429. Also, the fuel injected 460s came with a double roller timing chain from the factory. So you don't have to buy a high dollar double roller to put on a 460. You can go to a parts store and just tell them you want a timing chain for a 460 that's fuel injected. You know, anywhere from 87 to 93, you'll get a double roller. And they have straight up timing. So, no need to buy something real expensive. Now, of course, it's not adjustable, but it is straight up timing and it's double roller. Now, the biggest killer to the 429 460 was the exhaust port. Now, this right here is a bone stock 460 exhaust port. Let me get you some light on it. Alright, you can see down in there. You can see that big knot back here? That's your thermactor port for the basically an air pump. But that blocks a lot of the exhaust flow. A lot. I mean, the exhaust side is just horrible on these heads. But it's an easy fix. Because I posted a video about 2 years ago, I guess, on how to fix them. And that's all it takes, is just a little bit of time. And I show you how to do it in that video. So if you need to know, just go watch that video. But it's not hard. Just takes a couple hours per head. I mean, you can, do the same things that you do to any cylinder head. Like, cut the valve guides down, polish them, things like that. But they need that thermactor port ground out and plugged. And I'll show you how to do that in that video. You can go to bigger valves and stuff, but right here is your biggest improvement that you can make, period. Now, just on a side note, this is a fuel injected 460 head. Notice how much smaller the exhaust port is, because Ford totally redesigned it, and Ford had finally started to figure out, hey, you know what, this whole velocity thing actually works. Which granted, the fuel injected head does need some improvement too. There's some places that you can fix in it and stuff, but they're high velocity heads. That's why if you'll notice, the aftermarket heads, aluminum heads, have a smaller D-shaped port rather than the old style port like this. And Ford was finally catching on towards the end of the 460 run that, hey, velocity works. Another place that'll really help you is the exhaust manifold. Granted, running headers is better if you can afford them. But if you can't, get the truck manifolds, because they have a 2.5 inch outlet. Whereas the cars, I don't know if they're even 2 1/4. I think they're just like 2 inch outlets. But at the most 2 1/4. So, buy headers if you can. But at the very minimum, use truck manifolds. Plus, if you're putting a 460 in a truck, the passenger side car manifold will not clear the frame. That's why if you ever look at a truck on the passenger side that has a 460 and the frame's been cut, That's because it's got car manifolds. Car manifolds will not, you can't get the pipe and stuff on it the way that they come out. So always get truck manifolds. Alright, so we went over compression, timing, and the exhaust side of the cylinder head. So what's left? Well, you've got the intake manifold. As far as the stock, what I call the truck manifold, because most of the trucks used a Holley carburetor, whereas the Lincoln used that funky 4350 Motorcraft spreadbore carburetor. Well, they were just horrible. But as far as the truck manifold that has the Holley bolt pattern, there's nothing wrong with it. Not a thing in the world, especially for street use or for a truck. You know, 5,000 to 5,500, that's all you're going to see. There's not really any advantage to going to an aluminum one. The only advantage you'll have is weight. But power output, no, there's really not. You know, like a lot of people like that Wine Stealth manifold. And they work great, but you'll lose bottom end versus using the stock manifold. You know, if I was going to go aluminum, and I do have an aluminum one for this motor, it's Edelbrock Performer. It's just a copy of the stock Ford intake. So if weight's not an issue, stay with the stock intake, because you're just spending money that you don't need to. You know, now we have camshaft. Believe it or not, you know, with the exception of the Cobra Jet, Super Cobra Jet, for, you know, Police Interceptor, the regular 429 460 used the same camshaft through the entire run. The same camshaft that's in a 429 Thunderjet in 1968 is the same camshaft that powered the 1997 F350 of the 460. It never changed. So the 360 horsepower rating in 1968, same camshaft. When you look at it, I mean, it actually is a small camshaft, but they're big valve heads. You know, big valves, bigger ports, you don't need as big of a camshaft. The stock Ford camshaft, believe it or not, works really good in trucks. Of course, I know everybody wants to cool idle and stuff, but I'm saying if that's not an objective of just ultra low end power and brute pulling, the Ford camshaft, I mean, it really is. It's good. You know, I just can't tell you enough good things about the 460. It doesn't have a lot of weak points. I mean, some of the things that I went over are some of the same things that hurt all engines in the 70s, like the low compression, you know, things like that. You know, the biggest technical thing is the exhaust side of the head. As far as the intake side of the head, well, on the Marine 460s, Ford used a 429 Super Cobra Jet intake with big tennis ball size ports, but guess what? They used a standard head. Was there a horrible port mismatch? Absolutely there was. But it didn't hurt it. It didn't hurt it at all. So there is another option if you want to run a Super Cobra Jet intake and just run the standard head. Ford did it, so you can too. I'm not going to do that. That would just bother me. I just couldn't do it. But Ford did it. You know, if it was up to me, I'd be like Oprah Winfrey. But instead of giving away cars, you know, it'd be like, you get a 460, you get a 460, you get a 460. Everybody gets a 460. Because they really are that great of a motor. I mean, like I said, it's one of the last pushrod engines that Ford designed. And they learned a lot, you know. Unlike the FE, you don't have that funky oil filter adapter. It doesn't have the inherent oiling problems that FEs have. It's got canted valves, a really, really stout bottom end. Outside of the weight, this is the engine to have. So, let's all sing the praises of the immortal 460. So, I hope this helps some of you. Be sure and hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. And the next one, I'm going to show you what gaskets I use to build a 460. And I want to show you some that you've probably never seen before. And they're not high dollar, but they're really good gaskets. So, stay tuned. Me and the pups will be back with another one. See you.